Not surprisingly, Austin has several offbeat museums, including the Museum of the Weird, which we'll cover in a separate video, but the Texas Toy Museum is another, and it's located downtown on Congress Avenue between 3rd and 4th Streets. Now let's head inside, past Han Solo and Carbonite. Now, as of 2020, the museum costs $9 for adults, $6 for children, and $8 for senior and military folks, and this place is open late until midnight on the weekends, and it's comprised of a display of historic toys behind glass and an old-fashioned arcade with unlimited free play included in museum admission. We'll start with the toys, and this display contains Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello, Splinter, April O'Neil, Heroes in a Half Shell, Turtle Power, lots to be found here. And a case full of Transformers, Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Megatron, the whole gang is here. Transformers have had a really long run, revived with all of the Hollywood blockbusters of the last decade. They really started in the 80s, so we've enjoyed decades of Transformers toys from Hasbro. And this case has several series of toys, among them the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which was a TV series that ran from 1993 to 1996 that spawned movies and video games, and of course, these action figures. Here we have what looks like Happy Meal toys, if I'm not mistaken, Happy Meals having been introduced in 1979. Now we pivot from action figures to video games, and we're covering a really wide span of time here, from the most primitive systems to home entertainment systems from Nintendo and Sega that brought console gaming into the mainstream in millions of homes across the world. We see the 64-bit Atari Jaguar, the 16-bit Super Nintendo there, the 32-bit Neo Geo here, now the original 8-bit NES with light gun there with the Mario toy on top, and the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive with optional mounted Sega CD, which I think cost $300 back in the 90s. Cabbage Patch Kids were first introduced in 1978 and are highly collectible, even if they're not as popular now as they once were. We also have some Care Bear items here, which were quite popular in the mid-80s and have never really been retired as a brand. And now my favorite blast from the past, the Masters of the Universe series starring He-Man, which, if I recall, was first introduced to the public as a line of toys by Mattel in 1982, and then later became a TV series that many of us remember. And in this case, we find Castle Grayskull, and I believe I had that exact toy growing up. There's Skeletor. Next up here, I believe, is Thundercats, which is not something I really watched growing up, but I believe that was also an 80s television series, followed up by additional series in the 90s and the 2000s. And I don't know the names of these characters, so please excuse me. But we leave this case and we see the rest of the museum, and look what we have here. You knew they'd have it. It's Star Wars. And I'm quite sure that Star Wars toys, which span many decades, could and probably do have their own museum, so I won't even attempt to cover this topic in any depth. But the owner of this museum was present this day and asked me what toys I played with when I grew up, and I described a carrying case in the shape of Darth Vader's head, and he said that there is a version of the same that is plated with the same gold material as this C-3PO case that you see there, right there at the bottom, that fetches many thousands of dollars. Obviously not the version I had, unfortunately, but mine is probably worth something. Now we move on to DC Comics, and I actually had this Hall of Justice playset that you see there, the yellow one. I remember working all summer with the promise that my parents would buy me that Hall of Justice, and they did. Not sure how much it's worth now. I should mention you can get a lot of these things on eBay, but it would take thousands of dollars to acquire this collection. Now, this display has a smattering of toys and dolls related to various classic TV shows, including Pee Wee Herman there. I won't tell you the word of the day. And we have, of course, Indiana Jones, that entire series. And here's the Ghostbusters and the famous Firehouse, which is another toy that I believe I received from Santa on Christmas morning one year. And then More, don't forget E.T. And now we're getting into super vintage toy territory. We have Zorro, an early version, perhaps, of the Mr. Potato Head dolls, some sort of robot. And vintage G.I. Joes when they were truly dolls and not plastic action figures. And speaking of G.I. Joe, perhaps the biggest display in the entire museum is devoted to that universe. Just look how huge it is. See if you can find Cobra. These vintage Western themed toys sort of remind me of Woody from Toy Story and the series that he would have come from, the fictional series. So think Jane West, Howdy Doody. Just fascinating. And now we have the Simpsons, which naturally is the longest running television series in history, have produced many toys and collectibles over the years. I'm sure you can identify many of your favorite characters from that show. And these, I can assume, may be the oldest toys in the entire museum. Wooden toys from Disney. Steamboat Willie, Snow White, Donald Duck, Goofy, Pluto. And at the bottom, what do we have there? It looks like a play gun that would probably get you arrested or shot today. It doesn't even have an orange tip marking it as a toy. It looks pretty real. Garbage Pail Kids, a line of trading cards and stickers popularized in the 1980s and used by older children to terrorize me when I rode the bus home from kindergarten, but now, of course, highly collectible. Well, that's it for the toys, but as I mentioned, there's also a video arcade with a dozen or so classic original arcade games and pinball machines that don't require coins. You can have unlimited play, just press the button. You can spend hours here on the arcade games alone. So in summary, the vintage toys combined with the playable arcade provides nearly unlimited value and nostalgic pleasure, and it should be considered a must-do if you visit downtown Austin. Hope to see you there. March W13 out.